On this edition of ITG, we have got some WVU royalty. Terry Bowden is going to join us to discuss his career, to discuss Zac Alley, Rich Rodriguez, this current alliteration of WVU, and more. We'll also vent for a few minutes as the men's basketball team gets historically snubbed from the big dance. All of that and more on this edition of In the Gun.
You are now watching Believe.
ITG.
With Wes, Owen, and Jed.
I've got the best teammates in the business.
No way!
They both played the game. They both know the game. Owen is the runaway beer truck known for having some fun.
Owen Schmitt, you have a podcast In the Gun.
Owen Schmitt, like a runaway beer truck down the sidelines.
Jed is the signal caller who is the X's and O's and the brainiac.
Statistically, always punting on fourth down makes no sense.
So we've combined those two skill sets.
Skills I've acquired over a very long career.
You are In the Gun.
Once you enter this family, there's no getting out.
In the Gun, episode 235 of your new favorite WVU football podcast. I'm Wes Uhler, as always, with the best teammates in the business. I've got the signal caller, Jed Drenning, and we have got a special guest, Terry Bowden, going to join us in just a few minutes. It's going to be a lot of fun. Him and Jed are going to swap some old war stories. We're going to get his thoughts on Rich Rodriguez, Zac Alley, two guys that he is very familiar with. You know, Jed, he gave Zac Alley his first defensive coordinator, play calling, FBS job, youngest defensive coordinator in FBS when he hired Zac Alley. So this is a guy, Terry Bowden, obviously has the playing history with WVU, the family history with WVU, and some direct connections to the staff currently. Obviously, direct connections with you as a former coach of yours as well. So this one's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun. And, I don't know why I didn't think of this sooner. A couple weeks ago, I was thinking about Coach Bowden. I was like, wait a minute, why don't I bring him on the show? I was like, are you kidding me?
Yep.
I mean, think about it. Well, first of all, he's a great guest anyway. I mean, you talk about the stories, and some of them you will hear. The things he did in the SEC at Auburn, National Coach of the Year, what he did at Sanford when he recruited us and built that thing up, what he did at Salem College in the 80s, before Rich got there even. And what's funny, Wes, is we kind of regarded ourselves like Terry was at Salem for 3 years and built a very good football team, a couple conference championships. He had a gunslinger in Jimbo Fisher at the point, doing incredible things offensively at the quarterback spot. But he got a lot of transfers and these ragtag, discarded guys that came not just from Florida State, but from elsewhere. And when Rich built Glenville State into what he did, and all of us came there, we always regarded that as kind of Salem 2.0. Because not only had Rich coached at Salem, but we had so many connections to those Salem teams.
Sure.
Like my connection to Jimbo, my best receiver, Chris George, his big brother, and I mean big by big in more ways than one, Pat George was the starting tackle for Salem, guarding Jimbo. So we had so many connections. We kind of felt like we took the mantle and just kept running with it at Glenville. We were the new Salem Tigers, the Glenville State Pioneers were. So it's fun to get into some of this. Anytime I bump into one of these guys that I have this kind of history with, I'm always terribly excited. And this isn't something I'll mention to Coach Bowden, but I remember the first time I met his dad. His dad was at one of our games. I don't know if it was a spring game or in the regular season, maybe he had a bye week, whatever it was, but Bobby was up from Tallahassee. And I remember the stories is what I remember. I was told about all this because I don't literally remember it. I had a concussion from the game. So after the game, I was in Coach Bowden's office. The trainers were waiting to decide what they were going to do with me. I was going to be going to, the hospital in Birmingham. Some level, they were going to do something with me. Well, while I was waiting, Bobby came in and he was visiting with Terry, and Terry had gone back down the hall to do something else. And I was singing Elvis songs to Bobby. And I don't remember this. I was told about it after the fact. Who knows what, I hope it was at least a good Elvis song. It wasn't if I was singing it, but it's just, I have so many memories like that, these crazy things that people telling me, do you know what you did yesterday? You were singing to Bobby Bowden in Terry's. I was what? So that was my first chance to meet Bobby, and I sang to him. I serenaded him with Elvis, but But it's going to be fun. We're going to dig into a lot of old stuff. The connective tissue, I'm always amazed by it in college football.
Yeah.
Hopefully
In
we get into
football,
some of the names.
in football, period. It's insane.
Football period. You're right. Football period, just in general. But I hope he gets into some of the names that he has these weird connections with, because that'll be fun. But when you look back to when he was playing at West Virginia, that was an interesting time. He got to play for his dad for 1 year, but then for Frank Signetti for a couple of years. Yes, we struggled in terms of wins and losses, no doubt about it. But that was a interesting time in terms of who was coming and who was going, the types of players like the Oliver Lucks that were coming in. And it was just an interesting time when you look at even some of the guys that were on the staff. But anyway, I'm terribly excited. It's on me for not thinking of this sooner. He would have been a great guest any offseason. We've had this podcast, but under the circumstances, with his history with Zac Alley,
it's a perfect
Coach
timing.
Rod, are you kidding me? Come on. He's about to offer us something you can't get anywhere else.
Some divine intervention there, and I think the universe owed us that one after what the universe did to us with March Madness. We'll get to that in just a second. A thank you to our friends at Bet Online. The game starts here for being a presenting sponsor of In the Gun. Also, if you're going to drive to Chapel Hill because you got some angry words for Bubba Cunningham, take a Toothman Ford down to Chapel Hill, because we all know cars cost less in Grafton. Big thanks to everybody there at Team Toothman and our guy JR. Before we talk about the absolute robbery, the miscarriage of justice for the WVU men's basketball team, I do feel bad for a couple other things happening around campus that have understandably been pushed to the back burner with all of this justified basketball rage and now losing the head coach just about 48 hours later. A couple things. First of all, big shout out to the WVU rifle team. 20 times, West Virginia, 20 times, I say. That's a European soccer chant that I repurposed for WVU Rifle's 20th national championship. Tell Alabama football to catch up, because we got 20 of them things in rifle. It had been, by our standards, a little bit of a long drought in that regard, which is lofty standards. They've been waiting for I think like 5 years here to get that number 20, Jed. That is what we do best in terms of athletics. So big congratulations to the rifle team for number 20, and CC McCabe as well too. Women's indoor track and field, your 3,000-meter national champion. So pretty cool, Jed. Over the weekend, WVU winning 2 national championships, one in track and field for CC McCabe, and just an incredible cap to a career for her. This is the cherry to the whipped cream on top of an amazing career, and some hardware in 2 different sports coming back to Morgantown. Pretty cool.
The best part I saw, Wes, was when I retweeted the rifle team tweet. One of our commenters said something to the effect of never doubt a team whose mascot packs.
That's right.
I'm like, that's a good way of putting it. That's a good way of putting it, right? I mean, there's no doubt about it. So, yeah, 20, let's go for 21. Next thing you know, we'll be talking about it. And, I saw the 3,000 meters, and I started doing the math in my head, wondering how many years back you would have to go collectively to get to the point where I ran a total of 3,000 meters.
Oh.
To be in that kind of conditioning, that just, I'm telling you what, I had to be conditioned to play football, whether I liked it or not. But not that kind of condition. I mean, that's just a whole different level. When you're ripping off 3,000 meters at that kind of clip and that kind of pace, your lungs are just a freak of nature. I mean, you talk about a discipline that
it's insane.
It's insane.
I can't fathom like running that far that fast. It's just ridiculous. And Jed, she was in the 2024 Olympics in Paris, finished, I want to say, like 18th, 19th, something like that, at like 20 years old in the 2024 Olympics in Paris. 2028 Olympics here in what, another 2 or 3 years? She's gonna be right in that middle of her 20s, kind of prime of her running career. I think she's gonna have a great chance to get on a podium here in a couple years in the Olympics. So again, a lot of cool. As much as we're pissed off about the basketball team and the head coach leaving, some cool things that we have to mention here as well, certainly, including, Jed, our women's basketball team, who capped off another great season, undefeated at home, didn't lose a single game. They finished the season ranked maybe a little underseeded, but they get a sixth seed in the NCAA tournament. And funny enough, with all of our ire directed at North Carolina and their athletic director, Bubba Cunningham, the WVU women's basketball team being placed in the Chapel Hill region. So I need those girls to win their first round game, then beat UNC in the second round, and then much like Triple H and Shawn Michaels, do the D-Generation X WWE style crotch chop right at Bubba Cunningham as they walk off the court. Let's do it, ladies.
When that venue came out, you're just like, are you kidding me? I mean, it's just like, are you kidding me?
It's classic.
There's a strange symmetry to sports. Always has been, always will be. But yeah, just when we thought we couldn't complain enough, and you do feel bad for these other things going on and these negative things stealing their thunder, right?
Yes,
but
I do.
it left such a historically bad taste in your mouth with what happened to the men's basketball team. I mean, we were texting back and forth, discussing it back and forth, and I mean, I don't know what more you could say. The first team, there's 111 bracketologists. All 111 had us in. Of course, the 112th did not. That's the only one that counts, and that's the actual bracket. But we are the first unanimous choice in history to not get in. Now, granted, I would imagine out of 111 bracketologists, 90 of them probably cheat off each other's stuff, right? But still, it's very unlikely to be selected by all 111. And I'm sitting there thinking things like, when's the last time Kansas lost at home to a team that didn't make the tournament? When's the last time a team with 3 top 7 wins didn't make the tournament? I mean, we've heard all these things said in the last 48 hours by
First time a team with a 500 record or better in Big 12 conference play hasn't made the tournament. Yes. All these different things. 6 quad 1 wins. Like you said, the one that everybody really knows, 111 out of 111. First time in bracketology history that a unanimous team had missed it. North Carolina was on like 27 of those. Xavier was on like 50 of those. The Mountaineers were on all 111 and were snubbed from the tournament. And it's bad. Listen, we're a little sensitive to this stuff as West Virginia fans. We're always waiting for the next car crash, right? Like we're always just waiting for the next bad thing to happen. And when it does, kind of the woe is me, this is what happens to us. But they're screaming about it on ESPN. They're screaming. Mad Dog Russo is screaming about it. Stephen A. Smith is talking about it. Dickie V and John Rothstein are screaming and yelling about it, and Fran Fraschilla and all these people. Even Rick Pitino. Rick Pitino was on with McAfee and was like, what the heck are they doing to the Mountaineers?
I saw it.
And so it is unanimous across the board that it was a ridiculous decision. And then, of course, you get the news a little less than about 48 hours later that Darren DeVries is off to Indiana, not Iowa, his hometown, his home state, where his older brother played college football, where his parents live now still, that we all thought was a real possibility. No, it's IU, a different Big Ten school. And so, I mean, it has been a crushing 24 months for the WVU men's basketball program, but certainly a last 48 hours here as well, too. And there's a lot of justified anger. Like, people are mad at Bubba Cunningham, rightfully so. How can you be the athletic director at North Carolina and be the head chairman of the selection committee when North Carolina gets in when they clearly don't deserve it? And then you have the audacity, the gall to sit there on TV like a politician and lie to our faces and tell us all, well, I excluded myself from the room whenever North Carolina was discussed, pissing down our leg and telling us that it's raining outside when I can see sunshine and no precipitation.
What's the reason? Well, come on. Tucker DeVries has, without Tucker DeVries, and we consider player participation. Yeah. Okay, Wes, and I'll say this. That was the worst excuse I heard until they were asked why Indiana didn't make it. Again, here's the strange symmetry of all this. Indiana comes back up in the conversation. Did you hear the reason he gave as to why Indiana didn't make it? Well, they didn't make the most of their Q1 opportunities. And 1-12 in
and
Q1
1-12 North Carolina did. WVU, who had more Q1 wins than San Diego State, Xavier, and North Carolina combined. And
we had more than North Carolina without Tucker DeVries. I mean, it goes on and it goes on. Here's what I'll say about the Bubba portion of it. And let me finish, because the first part will sound misleading. But I don't for a minute think he did it for a $120,000 bonus for a month's salary. I don't think he did that for a minute. He's not obtuse enough to do it for $120,000. That's a month's salary to him.
Sure.
I think he did it That's bold, but okay, let's go there. Because when you're the AD at North Carolina, if your men's basketball team doesn't make the tournament,
See ya.
that's not just being the AD anywhere and it doesn't make the tournament. And I've heard people say, well, the only reason you're getting this national hate and all these people are piling on is because there's animus towards North Carolina anyway. They're just one of those brands that people hate. If it was somebody else, the national media wouldn't be latching onto it and giving them all this flack. And I'm like, if it was somebody else, it wouldn't have happened.
Correct.
That's the issue.
Correct.
That's the issue. If I hear things like
if it was San Diego State's athletic director sitting on the committee and not North Carolina's, West Virginia's in the tournament.
Yes. Again, because it's more about, you have to think, if you're the AD at Carolina, you don't care about the 120 grand nearly as much as you care about making the tournament. So you can't be told that under your watch they didn't make the tournament.
Right
now, you got to go to dark places.
You didn't make the tournament in a historically bad ACC year too, where Duke was the only team that was clearly an elite program in the ACC.
And they kept going back to, well, this vicious schedule that North Carolina played. Look, even if you want to get on board and say their schedule was tough, okay, fair enough. Anybody can lose to the best teams on a tough schedule. What did you do with that?
Sure.
They were 8. This is the first time I think I've ever heard quad 2 mentioned in this level. Did you hear him say they were 8-0 against quad 2 teams? I'm like, what are you doing here?
It is everything that is maddening about college sports. It's making up the rules as we go. It's rules for thee, but not for me. It's favoring the big brands. It's finding a way to get another big brand or another SEC school or another Big Ten school into the tournament. And like Bubba Cunningham is the easy target, and he deserves all the ire that he's getting without a doubt. Especially again for this. The committee, the chairman of the selection committee is doing damage control for his university on ESPN radio and all these different things, and pissing down your leg and telling you that it's raining outside when it's sunny and 80 degrees and no precipitation in the sky.
And even Parma's against them. Look at their travel arrangements.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And let's go San Diego State. Let's beat the. They're getting ready to tip off here in about a half an hour as we record this. Hopefully by the time this drops tomorrow, North Carolina will be on their plane ride back to Chapel Hill. But
lack of self-awareness, Wes. One of the Carolina fans tweeted, can't we just schedule West Virginia next year and beat the daylights out of...
Yeah, you're 0-5 against WVU.
We're 5-0 all time against you.
That's right. Michael Jordan ain't walking through that door, and even if he did, he never beat the Mountaineers either, baby.
It's so frustrating.
Jed, it's also like I'm frustrated with Brett Yormark. Like, dude, where's the real? They put out some half-ass statement. Are we so concerned about getting the Big 12 tournament to Vegas, or what the basketball court looks like, or getting Nelly or Limp Bizkit to play a halftime show while the SEC raids your bids and steals your mantle for no reason other than Greg Sankey's ridiculous narrative to make everything about college sports the SEC for the last 20 years? You're just going to lay over and die while they do nothing. They haven't won a national championship, the SEC, in over a decade in this sport, and you're going to let them steal it away from the Big 12 with no teeth like that, no spine from Brett Yormark? That pisses me off. And obviously, Greg Sankey sucks. I mean, he has ruined. We've got 2 6-win SEC conference teams getting into the tournament. Oklahoma and Texas won 6 conference games, Jed. That's as many in basketball as Penn State won, and they're in the tournament. It's 14 of 16 SEC teams. Are you bleeping kidding me? While the A10 runner-up, George Mason, who has been to a Final Four more recently than most of those SEC teams and won 26 games this year, isn't even on the bubble. What are we doing with this sport? It's already happened in college football. It's happening now in college basketball. The SEC has way too much influence. The big brands have way too much influence, and everybody else just has to suck it up and get in line. And if you're some people like us who grew up loving collegiate athletics year after year after year, there's been hit after hit after hit that is hard to stomach. But all of this football BS rolling downhill into men's basketball, it sucks. It absolutely sucks. And then again, as you and I mentioned, 2 days later, you lose your head coach to Indiana.
It's just turning the screw. It's like, as long as the word committee is associated with your sport, You will always simply be trying to make the best of a bad situation. As long as that word's associated, like, you know me, Wes, I'm a football fan through and through. Love high school football, love college football, love pro football. There's no football I don't love. But I thought about this before. My favorite thing about pro football, there's no committee. Unless you're trying to get into the Hall of Fame, and I'm fine
Correct.
with
No,
that.
there's an
no
exact way to
committee.
there's an
You don't
exact
use
way to
that
make the
word.
playoffs. There's an exact way to
Yes.
make the playoffs.
You do
yes.
it 1,000% on the field. Not 10%, 20%, 50%, not 99%. 1,000% on the field. And committees and bubbas don't matter. It's not Olympic figure skating. Human input and human error doesn't matter. I just it frustrates me.
Jed, looking back on it, and this is easy to say now, and I will be fair, I will put my hand up. I thought it was the right decision at the time, too. But a year and a half ago, a little over a year ago, when a 13-0 Florida State team got told by a committee, sorry, you can't be in the playoff because your quarterback got hurt, they went 13-0 Florida State, and a committee was able to say, because of an injury, sorry, you don't get to get into the playoff. That's the moment we should have all known that this is cooked, because it happened to Florida State. It didn't happen to WVU or TCU or Cincinnati or Oregon State. It happened to Florida bleeping State, 13-0, but sorry, a committee's going to tell you you don't get the chance because the wrong person got hurt. We should have all packed it up and called it a day then. It's an absolute joke.
It's a travesty. It's disheartening. It's frustrating. And, once again, the easy answer is to come back and say, well, then just beat Colorado. Just do this. Just
That wouldn't have mattered. It wouldn't have mattered. You beat Colorado, great. I still think you're out.
Well, I might argue maybe you're in. But I'll say this, Wes. The point of it's this. And a buddy of mine pointed this out to me. He's like, he knows way more about basketball than me. That's a low bar, first of all. But he said the issue here is, Jed, that there's always going to be teams frustrated they don't get in. Okay, it's just a matter of degree each year. Of course, sure, we all know that, right? But it usually comes down to 3 or 4 teams, and at least one of those teams, the first one out, is always going to be frustrated. Now, the reason West Virginia seems more frustrated and should be than normal, I'm not so sure we should have been one of those 3 or 4 teams being discussed with our resume. We were in 111 brackets. Should we even been one of the 3 or 4 sitting there sweating it out? No, that is the issue. That's the central issue right there. And if people want to tell me, well, you lost to Colorado, just beat this terrible Colorado team, just do this, just do it. Well, why do we have to do those things when North Carolina doesn't? See, what you're doing is you're not taking our best moments, you're taking our worst. Well, you're not taking their worst. So why does it work just that way with us? Of course, if we'd have won 1 or 2 more games, or it might have been, but that's the point. They didn't have to, but yet you're saying we had to. It's painfully frustrating on a million levels. And like you said, it happens, and then a matter of hours later, it feels like here's the news. I don't want to say out of left field, because there have been some reports whispered about Indiana, but there was so much focus on Iowa, right? And, we were sitting there trying to judge the merits of the Iowa job. Would you do that? Yes, it's home. Would you go home for that? I don't know. And then here comes Indiana, and you're like, well, game, set, match. That's a blue blood, and there aren't many blue bloods in college basketball. We don't have the war chest they have. We don't have a lot of things they have. So what I always say about ADs, it's an AD's job to get out in front of the market. And at a place like West Virginia, a developmental school, most schools are developmental schools. So it's Ren Baker's job to get out in front of the market and offer somebody something that the rest of the open market's not quite willing to offer him yet, or her yet. They're a year or 2 away from doing it, and that's what we did. I mean, you heard Darren DeVries' name mentioned last year, but weren't people clamoring to land him first, right? His name was definitely mentioned, but we kind of got out in front of things with Ren and signed him up. But here comes Indiana. It's all about timing. It's all about timing.
It is.
I mean, you would have liked to have think that, we go on a 2 or 3 or 4 year run, and he built something cool, and now you got even more brand equity than we already have.
And to be fair, Jed, I know a lot of people have dug up. His press conference where he was hired by WVU was 51 weeks ago. And a lot of people have dug up him talking about how, I'm not a job hopper. I want to stay here and build something long term. And that's been his entire career. He has not been a job hopper. Indiana is one of those programs that all of a sudden, if they've got you on their radar, that is one of those short list of wow, those guys type programs. Even though they haven't been with IU as of late, they still have the Big Ten backing, they still have the history, they still have the funding and the support at every level.
It's like 2006 Alabama. You're the right guy away from being right back at that.
Correct.
Right?
Correct.
I mean, 2006, yes. Alabama had turned into a marginal football team, losing to Louisiana Monroe Nick's first year because they weren't that good. But Nick Saban was the right guy. The rest is history. If you plug the right guy into Indiana, I'm not going to say you're back to the Bobby Knight era, but not to interrupt, but I thought of that very thing. It's
in that from that standpoint for me, it's like while there is part of me that's angry with DeVries of like just the like really dude, like 50 weeks later you're going to leave us and you're going to take your son who you redshirted after 8 games who might be an NBA draft pick with a. There's that part of me, but there's also the part of me that realizes what IU was, and maybe he didn't think that this was a realistic possibility. Maybe he told Ren Baker a year ago, I'm not taking the Iowa job next year, but he didn't know that the Indiana job was going to be a real possibility. Whatever. I will say this, though, Jed. Yeah. I don't need the transfer portal style statement from Darren DeVries and Tucker DeVries. I don't need it. I don't need the graphic with 3 paragraphs, the essay of how much WVU and how much Morgantown and how much the fan base and all that meant. Just change your pictures, rebrand your social media, and keep it moving. I don't need the having said all that. I'm really excited for this opportunity at Indiana. Just go. Because that's only going to twist the knife in there. The 3-paragraph essay about how much I loved Morgantown and WVU is only going to stick the knife in there more. Just rebrand your social media and keep it moving. Let the poor graphic interns do something else with their time.
I agree. And I think where I'll come down on this is if he goes to Indiana and he is, in fact, the next Bobby Knight, I'm just going to tip my cap and say, well, okay, there you go. That's why you did it. You bet on yourself. You won. You turned it into what it should be. I can't fault you one bit. But if his career more parallels a Dan Dockish from this point forward, I'm going to be like, dude, you screwed us. You screwed yourself. What happened here, So it's been a tough handful of days. It has in what should have been a very exciting time for the rifle team, for women's cross country, for the men's and women's basketball teams, for our baseball team that we haven't mentioned yet that's 16-1 to start the season. Like, this should be a very exciting time, and once again, it feels like the universe just kicking us right in the groin just when we thought we were getting back to feeling good and hitting spring ball and all these other things happening exciting around campus. But I will say this. I got full faith in Ren Baker. I mean, he's now gone through this process. I mean, geez, he's hired a men's basketball coach, a women's basketball coach, a baseball coach, a football coach. He just went through this search process, like we said, 50 weeks ago, not even a year ago. So I'm sure he's still got that same short list that he had a year ago that probably has a lot of the same names with it that he's at least got a baseline for. I trust Ren Baker, Jed, but my God, that poor guy, everything that he's been through, from the football change, from the Bob Huggins debacle to now this. Hashtag pray for Ren Baker. That's all I'm saying. And I'll say this. You know how Rich always says, I'm a better coach than I was yesterday and last year and 10 years ago. I want my players to be better. I want my other coaches to be better. Well, the same holds true for Ren Baker. Ren Baker, as good as he was a year ago when he hired Darren DeVries, he's better now. He's gone through another round of interviews at a very high level with incredibly high stakes with a lot of pressure, and he came out very favorably.
Sure.
So that's a learning experience for an AD. Everything's a learning experience. So whatever he knew a year ago when he was doing this, or a year plus ago, and that's the other thing we were talking about, Wes, and we got to get to break and get to Coach Bowden, but we were talking about the cycle. The first time, it was the early part of the cycle. You talk about the early part of the cycle. The earliest part of the cycle was almost into the other cycle. It was so early, right? This one is getting kind of late in the cycle, so it's a little bit of a different animal. So it's good that he already had that head start last year.
Yeah,
some of that heavy lifting and leg work's out of the way, and now he can kind of start on second base in this process instead of first base like he did last year.
It's only after we've lost everything that we're free to do anything. And what we will do next is have a much-needed light into the room here. We will talk with Terry Bowden on the other side. Another thank you to our friends at Fortis and our guy Rick Lewis for roof performance and financial certainty guaranteed. You got to visit fortis.us.com. And also, as always, a big thank you to our friends at Johnston Equipment for being a presenting sponsor of ITG. Make sure you're checking out Johnston Equipment, Route 33 between Weston and Buchanan. Terry Bowden, a guy who has got a lot to talk with us about when we return on the other side. You are in the gun. For nearly 20 years, Fortis has been the nation's leader in providing guaranteed roof performance programs for commercial buildings. Fortis offers roof performance solutions that feature extensive initial and ongoing reconditioning for commercial buildings as an alternative to traditional replacement, with long-term performance guarantees that are backed by global leader Lloyd's of London. Fortis offers a comprehensive range of roof performance management programs that provide financial security, extend the life of our customers' roofs, and make a significant impact on ROI. Fortis is currently improving performance and increasing ROI for customers at more than 4,800 locations, with more than 140 million square feet protected, including many Fortune 500 companies that have turned to Fortis to save money, gain financial certainty, and extend the life of their existing roofs. Fortis has helped customers save more than $520 million in capital roof replacement costs for an average ROI of over 250%. To learn more, visit fortis.us.com. Fortis, roof performance and financial certainty guaranteed.
Nobody supports the blue and gold Mountaineers like Toothman Ford. With over 20 NIL deals and counting, Toothman Ford continues to rally behind our student athletes. And it's time we rally and support the dealer that supports the Mountaineers. Not only does Toothman Ford offer the best prices in the state on pre-owned, their never over MSRP campaign on new Fords guaranteed to save you thousands. Drive with pride all season long, knowing you're supporting the dealer that fuels our Mountaineers. Toothman Ford, where cars cost less, in Grafton and at toothmanford.com.
There are better-known tractors in the world than Coyote. Ones with bigger names, longer histories, more popular hats, cute toy lines. But there's not a single tractor ever been built that's better equipped to do the dirty work. So we'll just focus on what really matters. Coyote, we dig dirt.
Now at Johnston Equipment, get 0% financing or a free loader with low-rate financing on select Coyote models in stock. Visit us on Route 33 between Weston and Buchanan.
Back in the gun here as we roll along, and it is the off season, so you know what that means. It's time to roll out our A-lists of guests here on ITG as we get into some conversations here with some of our favorites, and we have got a special one to kind of kickstart this 2025 off-season of guests here on In the Gun. A man who is very familiar with WVU football, a man very familiar with Rich Rodriguez, a man very familiar with Jed Drenning. Ladies and gentlemen, joining us here in the gun is none other than Terry Bowden. Terry, thank you so much for taking the time to do this, and hope you're well.
Thank you. I am well. And, being a coach that can find the diamond in the rough is something special. Jed Drenning right there. I found that diamond in the rough from Davis, by God, West Virginia, and took him down to God, it's hot, Alabama. That's every time I think of Jed, I think of God, it's hot down here.
that's his Jed impression, in case you haven't noticed.
That's my Jed. That's my
Jed.
Pretty good. My Jed in college impression.
It's a flashback. It really is. And people who listen to the podcast, follow the podcast, you've heard me talk about Coach Bowden before. You know my history. I think I'm pretty selective with my head coaches. I was just telling Coach Bowden. Coach Bowden had the good fortune of playing for two different head coaches in college. His dad, who's a Hall of Famer, and Frank Signetti Sr., who's a Hall of Famer, right? Well, I don't know if I'm that far behind him because I played for three head coaches. You're listening to one of them, Terry Bowden, the other two being Rich Rodriguez and Don Nealon. So we're part of a pretty neat club there. We pick our coaches pretty well, don't we?
It's amazing because when you're and I moved to West Virginia in '66. I went to grade school at Second Ward, junior high school, Morgantown Junior High on Spruce Street, Morgantown High School, then college. Went to school with people like Al Bonner, owns Jeans, Rocky Gianola, my best friend, who still keeps his hands on the West Virginia program. But, Morgantown, so many people. Rick Trickett worked. He coached at West Virginia when I was playing coached defensive line. And then he was my offensive line coach at Auburn. Jimbo Fisher, Tommy Bowden, Jack Hines, who was from Morgantown. All those on my staff throughout the years. And boy, the West Virginia memories are just so much, and the incredible coaches that have come from West Virginia.
And Coach, the years that you spent on the roster, I was going back trying to think. Okay, you crossed paths with Ollie Luck. I think he'd have been a freshman as you were a senior.
Sure.
I was trying to think of who populated that backfield, who was in that room with you.
Robert
Mickey
Alexander
was around. Robert Alexander was around.
Easily from Charleston. So the big running back from Charleston, easily. And of course, Robert was the big guy we signed. Then Danny Williams and Danny Kendra and that group out of DuPont, and which Danny Williams was from. We came in together, and a bunch of those guys. Rocky Giannola, he was on that team. And Rocky and I were best friends, grade school, junior high school, and college, and we still spend time together.
So now here's what's the impressive start that your career got off to from a coaching standpoint, right? Sometimes you might think, okay, when a guy gets a job quick, is it because of a relationship he has or a family member he has? You, in fact, left your family member to get the job. Okay, so you go down as a grad assistant with your dad at FSU. Right. So you're in Tallahassee as a grad assistant, and the next thing you know, you're the youngest head coach in the country 1 year later at Salem College. Not only that, you're ripping off West Virginia Conference championships. So were you 26 when you took the job at Salem?
26. And, I just wanted to do what my dad had done. My brother Tommy was the long-term assistant coach, which took him to Tulane and Clemson as the head coach. I liked what my dad became a head coach at 26 at a little old school, South Georgia College. And so I said, that's the way I want to start. I want to leave my dad as a graduate assistant, take a job nobody wanted, and it was my Morgantown connections that got me that job. You think of Joe Manchin. He had an uncle named Joe Manchin that lived in Clarksburg that was a physical therapist, actually, and he's the one that got me the job at Salem College because nobody wanted it at that time. It wasn't like I was so good. It's like, here's one nobody wants it. Because they were 0-10 the year before, but I loved it there. I found Jimbo immediately as a quarterback, and we won a couple of conference championships and had a great time. What a great learning experience down at the Valley of Learning, we called it, Salem, West Virginia.
Yeah, you had that pipeline you created from Tallahassee, right? You had that talent pipeline. Orson Mobley, Leland Allen.
I had Jeff. I had a big nose guard from Michigan, an offensive tackle from Michigan, Missouri. I mean, what happened? Salem was hurting for students. I mean, back during the Vietnam War, they were up to maybe 1,500. We were down to about 800 when I took the job. And if you could, and I don't say this in disrespect, but if you could breathe, you could pretty much get in. If you had a good pulse, and you could afford it, you could get people in. So we had all the guys that were thrown off of people and had some unbelievably good players there, along with some incredible West Virginia high school guys that we brought in, and were able to. I mean, we had two out of the 3 years we went to the playoffs, and we have a homecoming football. We have a football reunion every year. It's every other year at Salem, and it's on any team, all teams together, because they drop football. And I think the older guys were so pissed off they won't go back on campus. We always went to Wheeling to Ogilvy Park every other year to have to celebrate our football teams over the years.
Very understandable. So a lot of success you had there in Harrison County, West Virginia, a couple of conference championships. And you had what I would call your gap year as a head coach. You left and you went up with Jerry Faust to Akron as an assistant. And you ended up in 1987. You took a job at, I'll call it little old Sanford University, a Division III program, with an understanding they were going to take the massive leap from Division III to, back then we still called it 1AA scholarship football. That was a huge leap. So you go down to Sanford in 87, and all you do you go 9-1. You rip off 3 dozen NCAA offensive scoring records and yardage records, and Jimbo's national offensive player of the year at the Division III level. So you really started humming, and then you made the leap. We were your first scholarship class. I was part of that class coming in 88.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll tell you what, Coach, when I look back 1987 to 1992, what you did at Sanford, taking that leap from Division III, Wes, listen to what this guy did. He had his competitive right out of the gates. Now, sure, we took a couple on the chin from some of those good, Georgia Southern teams, those Irk Russell teams. It's going to happen. But he slowly and surely had us more competitive than we should be, ahead of the curve. Here it was 4 years later. He has this team not just competitive in a national semifinal game against Jim Tressel and Youngstown State. Mm-hmm. That's how he ended up getting the Auburn job. But talk about Sanford for a minute, Coach.
Yeah, Sanford, my mother and dad went to Sanford. And my grandparents, what bit of college they could get during the Depression, they went to Sanford. So that was our family school. And so my dad had been a quarterback there, my mother a cheerleader, and then my dad became a coach. So when it opened, actually their president called me to see if I would come down there. We had played them when I was at Salem, and it was I kind of led them into it. We beat them like 77-0. They were just starting football. I feel guilty now, but not then, about putting them on our schedule because they were just struggling. But the president was impressed. He hired me there and wanted to move straight to 1AA. I said, well, gosh, we ain't even winning no game. We're not even winning at Division III. Let's stick around one more year, see if we can pull off a few wins. Of course, by that time, I talked Jimbo into transferring up, and Tim Richardson, some other players that came out, maybe Shorty Smith, a little running back.
Shorty Smith.
We had about 4 or 5 players that out of Salem that brought in, and we go from like 2-8 to 9-1 that first year, and that got us on the roll. But you know what? When you came in, 88, 89, 90, 91. 91's when we had our big year. It was amazing. We had scholarship players, and they played as freshmen. They played as sophomores, as juniors. Yeah. And by the time we got to our 4th year, which was our not even a redshirt class, our guys had been through the wars. Now I remember McNeese beat the pee out of us one time and beat us up pretty good. But we learned how to play football and we got better as a team. Of course, Jimbo is now a coach. Jack Hines, whose father owned Hines Tires back in Morgantown years and years ago, was on my staff. Jeff Bowden, who grew up with me in Morgantown, Jimbo, they were all together at Sanford. And buddy, we had, this year, I'm speaking in in Birmingham, March 28th. They're putting our 91 team in the Hall of Fame, the entire team in the Hall of Fame. And so with me not coach, so I'm going over to speak to the Letterman's Club on the 28th of March, and then the Hall of Fame's on the 26th of June. But it was a special team for us in our 4th year of scholarships. For us, I will always say Auburn was Auburn and other places were Salem, but what we did at Sanford was it really set me on course to have confidence that what I knew to do in building programs, I could take with me to other places.
You mentioned scheduling Sanford when you were at Salem. Now I'm kind of wondering, why did you schedule Glenville when you were at Sanford? Because then you left. You and Rich scheduled that game. Then you left and took the Auburn job. I think you had another 77-0 in mind, maybe. But because we cut them in transition after you left, and we almost pulled the upset. Yeah.
Well, Jed, that's part of turning a program around or building a program is knowing how to schedule. I mean, you're at Auburn. They don't know the difference between Murray State and Georgia Southern. They're all 1AA, and they don't want to play them. But if you're a coach, you know the difference between Murray State and Southern, and you know which ones are good and bad. And Glenville, who I had they had a coach named Frank Vincent, who was the head coach there, who had come out of Charleston High School back in the old days when I coached there. But by the time I got to Sanford, they were in transition. And I knew that would be a non-conference game, that if we just go up there and do a solid job. And I don't know if you know the story. We got to the stadium and our equipment truck got lost. We had to stay in Charleston the night before and drive up the day of the game. And our equipment truck got lost. And when we were pregame warm-up, the truck drove up and piled all the uniforms in the middle of the floor. And we all had to just run there and pick out what we could wear for that game. But we got them at the right time. That was before you and Rich Rodriguez and got that thing going again.
I tell you what, you talk about that 91 class going into the Hall. I am tickled pink to hear that. Those were my guys that I came in with, right? And I took she was my girlfriend at the time. She's my wife now, but This will tell you I picked a good one. She actually was willing to go up into the blowing snow and wind and cold of Youngstown, Ohio, so I could attend the game and watch my old teammates and cheer for them in that playoff game. And Coach Bowden, I'll still tell you, Jim Tressel or not, had it been 65 degrees and nice weather out there, and I bet you anything Ben Wiggins would agree with me, I think you guys would have beat those turkeys. That's what I think.
Well, Jed, you're a quarterback, and you know what it means to go out there. And in the North, it's not really the cold weather that gets you; it's the wind. And Akron is very much like any lakeside community or near Lake Erie effect. When the wind blows at Youngstown, you can't throw the ball. I mean, Ben Wiggins was warming up on the sideline, and we were a throwing football team. They were a running team, as Jim Tressel liked to be at Youngstown. And our quarterback could not hit the receiver standing still on the sideline in pregame warm-up. And I said, dang, we're going to have some problems here. And it stayed 0-0, 3-0. And I kept throwing it deep, hoping their guy would fall down and we'd catch one and go deep. Yeah. But there was not there's not a whole lot of accurate throwing, as windy as it was in Youngstown that day.
I look like a crazy person. I'm up in the stands watching this. And I see you come out, you run R-swap. Z post, okay, our swaps 7 boot Z post.
Oh yeah, you know it all.
Brian James, our Z, it's just streaking open, and I'm yelling BJ, but poor Ben, just that thing gets caught in the wind, and the next thing you know,
it's either going to overthrow or underthrow because the wind it's so much of an impact. But that's part of the year. And Jim Tressel had some great teams at Youngstown. Marshall and Youngstown always competed. It seems like for the national championship.
They sure did. And again, the yeoman's work you did at Sanford, you parlayed that into the Auburn job. Mm-hmm. And you talk about hitting the ground running. First of all, you took the job under less than ideal circumstances. There was a postseason ban. There was some things going on off the field that you inherited that you had to deal with. Nonetheless, right out of the gates, you stepped in there and you and your crew take that football program. They go 11-0. You remember that Florida team, Wes, that pounded us and dog whipped us in the Sugar Bowl? Well, Coach Bowden gave a little bit of
Mike Vanderjack's favorite Florida Gators. Yes,
yeah, that's right. Well, this crew, Coach Bowden took that Auburn team down into the swamp and upset them. And you also beat a really good Bama team in the Iron Bowl to end the year. And then you start off 9-0 the next year.
Yeah, we really.
Your first 20 games at Auburn.
Well, people say, "Well, gosh, you're 36. You're a first-year Division I head coach," but there were several things that happened. One, my 4 years at Florida State, my dad was probably considered the riverboat gambler. He was the great play caller of that era, late 70s, early 80s, and I was able to be his self-scout guy, so I could call his plays exactly like he did when I was young. And secondly, by the time I got to Auburn, I had been a head coach at Salem and Sanford 10 years. And I like to tell people I made mistakes when nobody was watching. So by the time I got to Auburn and we had a big crowd, I wasn't in my first year. I was in my 11th year as a head coach. And I had a great staff. I mean, let's go back and look. Even from West Virginia, you had my brother Tommy as the offensive coordinator, Rick Trickett as my offensive line coach, Jimbo Fisher as my quarterback coach, Jack Hines, who they set the record at Auburn for interceptions. He was my secondary coach out of Morgantown. We had a great, tough, young staff, and we just found a way to win and found a way to win. And Alabama was the defending national champion, and we couldn't go to a bowl. We couldn't play in postseason because we had been put on probation. In fact, we were the last team not on TV. We were the best team you never saw because we were on probation. And that back then, they'd have big TV contracts. They don't do that nowadays because it costs the conferences too much money. But we couldn't be on TV, and we won every game. And, it's funny. My dad, we go undefeated, and I get the National Coach of the Year award, and we're the only undefeated team in the country. And it's the first coach ever go undefeated in his first year Division I, and we're on probation. So, who wins the championship in 93? My dad. I'm not even the best coach in my own family in my best year of my life. But Auburn has now claimed that as a national champion. The National Hall of Fame Association named him. So nowadays, now that my dad's passed on and he can't make a fun of me right now face to face, I said, yeah, we're going to claim that national championship that somebody gives us. I think there's a banner on the wall at Auburn. But anyway, it was an amazing time at that point to get that one turned around. I don't even know that it was better than what we got accomplished at Sanford. But to go from there, they had two straight losing seasons and lost 3 years in a row to Alabama. And for us to come back and win those games, and it did start with Florida. That big win we had over Florida in '93 was only one-upped by the big win in '94 with Florida at their place, which was probably my biggest win as far as underdogs and pulling off a win was '94 against Florida when we beat them down in the swamp.
So to give you some indication, Wes, we're talking, okay, I'll rattle off the list real quick from 1993. You start with SEC Coach of the Year, obviously. Walter Camp, National Coach of the Year. Sporting News, National Coach of the Year. The Paul Bear Bryant Award. The George Munger Award. The Eddie Robinson Coach of the Year Award. So the hardware was all there. And you talk about earning it against the most adverse of situations. You certainly did that. And I remember fast forwarding into 94, you won those 20 straight games. Was it Georgia that beat you? I remember the night that the game was played. Here's who beat you.
Georgia tied us. We're 20-0.
Okay.
And we got Georgia at home, and we had found ways to win every game. I mean, in the last seconds, and just every week, our kids thought they were going to find a way to win. Well, we're playing Georgia, and they tied up late. Then we're driving down like we've done 20 straight times in a row in 2 years, get down to a 20-something yard line for a chip shot field goal. And I'll never forget it. We had a new kicker that year, and I remember looking down the sideline at Rick Trickett, and Rick looked back at me, and we kind of shook our head because this kid was I don't want to say he was gutless, but he was nervous. He was a nervous kicker. And we looked at each other, shook our head, and he missed that thing, and we had our first tie. And then we missed a 4th and 1 with inches to go against Alabama the next week and got beat 21-14. But ended up winning 20 straight. And then 21. And then Alabama got us that second year in the last game of the season. Still on probation that year because we couldn't go to a playoff again.
Well, what I remember about that 20-game win streak ending, I'll tell you where I was the day you played Georgia. I was in Statesboro. I was at Glenville State coaching with Rich, and we played Georgia Southern, the last game of our regular season. We were getting ready for the national playoffs out in Montana the next week. But I remember after the game, I think it was Ike that Rich met. Rich got on a plane and jetted to Auburn to be on the sidelines at your game. So he was there for your Georgia game after coaching our Georgia Southern game. And I told him when he got back to Glenville, I was like, Terry's not going to let you come back to another game. You broke his streak. I was like, come on,
It really was some big seasons and big wins for us. And darn, I had something on my mind. I can't remember what I was going to say, but maybe it'll come back to me.
Sure thing. And
I know what I was going to say. Let me say this gives you it of all the people we're playing Georgia the first 2 years, and the safety was pretty good little safety. It was Will Muschamp. So I hired him as a GA in '95. And then the 95, we played Georgia in Georgia, and the player that replaced him at safety was their Kirby Smart. And so that's how old I am. Wow. Those were the two players that were and they were both those hard-nosed walk-on types that are just great, tough guys. And Will ended up being an outstanding coach, and of course Kirby. And then Kirby went on to his first GA job was with my father at Florida State. That's where he first started.
All roads lead to Rome. And so you once you got out of Auburn, you ended up in the broadcast business. Okay. Now, what I'll always think of with you as a broadcaster, and maybe you know where I'm going with this. Wes, I don't know if you remember this. Yours truly was doing color for our come from behind win over Louisville in 2005.
Oh, yeah. I was at
the color for TV.
Yeah.
What do you remember about that?
I remember I had never watched a game in the new stadium because we played in Old Mountaineer Field when I played. That's right. Then I got into coaching. I never could go watch my alma mater. I couldn't go back for homecoming. Never went back. But finally, I got to go back and broadcast. And I worked with Mike Tirico, but I want to say I worked with Big Jerry Punch on that game. It might have been me and Mike Tirico. I can't remember. But anyway, we got the game, and we go to lunch with the quarterbacks at West Virginia, little pizza place there below the medical center. I forget that there was a little pizza place. We went to lunch because they had a quarterback from Pittsburgh that was their starter. But Pat White, we were trying to guess, which one are you going to play? Which one are you going to start? And so that was the whole discussion. And Pat White had not become Pat White yet. You know, he was kind of the guy he was going to be. But that was the game that Pat White became the sensation that he was in college with a come-from-behind victory over Louisville.
was so massive. That was
Unbelievable.
just so massive. And again, I've gone back, coach, and you did a great job as an analyst. I've watched that game, the replay on YouTube. I go back and watch that every off season,
Right.
and it's just fun. You're adding a little spice and color between. That had to be hard on you because we were no huddle, right?
No,
So
I know
you got to
that.
hurry up and squeeze it in there. But what other broadcast memories do you have during that
Well,
stretch? What are your summer memories there?
Well, when I left Auburn, and you mentioned it, and we don't need to get into it, but I left with some hard feelings, probably about football, the things that happened at Auburn, and the disappointment that I had in realizing there are times when it's not what happens on the football field, but what goes on in the personalities and those type of things. And so when I left Auburn, when I resigned at Auburn, I was a little bit bitter, but that was my life. But ABC came along and offered me a job in New York. And I said, well, I'll do that for a couple of years. That'll be fun. And so I got to work in Times Square next to John Saunders. And it was the BCS year. So we got it. We did pregame, halftime, and postgame. Game day is not allowed to be on the air at that time past noon. And so those guys had to be off the air at noon. And John Saunders and I took over all the pregame, halftime, and postgames on all the BCS games, went at 12 and at 3 and at 8, So we had a ball. And after a couple of years, they kept upping me in my salary. And I said, "Dang, I'm gonna do this. This is hard. I mean, I'm undefeated. I'm always right, and I go to the championship
job
every year.
Security is much better.
Where's the downside of this job?" And so I turned down some really nice jobs, and then because I was going to do that, but like a lot of people, I turned 50. I looked in the mirror and said, I want to go back and coach football and finish up. And I had been out, and there were some great memories. We were in the Good Morning America studios, and there's a ton of people from Asia who've got me on their video cameras. They have no idea who I am. They just saw some guy inside the glass on TV, and I'm on their cameras. They said, "Who is that guy? Who is that guy?" And I have no idea. They don't know. But anyway, enjoyed it. Glad I got back in, but I'll say there's a lot of us coaches at that time. We were just starting to do TV. If we got out of coaching, or we were in between jobs, and very few, most got back in. I stayed out so long, it started to get hard to get back in. I mean, when you're out 10 years, and so I talked to Neuheisel, and a lot of the coaches those days couldn't get back in because they wanted to go right back to where they were. They want to go back and be the head coach at the top program.
Sure.
And I finally said, I like football like Jed Drenning likes football. It is a passion, and I know it's a passion. Yeah, I said, I just want to go back and coach. The money's not a big factor right now, but I just want to coach football. So I went back to North Alabama, Division II football, and started over. And I've been able to turn programs around. And we were going to mention the ULM, but the ULM, because I got a new AD, and he decided he wanted to go with a new head coach. Of all the jobs I've ever taken, that was the only one that I lay in bed and I said, I didn't get to finish. I didn't get to finish turning that one around, and I didn't. And so, now I'm content with it. Just like my dad, when he left Florida State, that wasn't pretty. That wasn't pretty. And sometimes that's just the way this profession goes. And you can't let it eat at you, because too many good memories, and that's all there are right now is awful good memories.
Coach, I'm glad you mentioned that, because one of the things I always remember, and I've mentioned it to Wes and the guys on the show before, I remember playing against your dad and Jim Bowe, that FSU team in the Gator Bowl in 2010 for your dad's last game. And I was fortunate enough to be standing on the field for my job 10 feet from your dad and your mom, as your dad watched the big screen with the video honoring his career. And that will always be, that's top 5 special moments in my football life. Yeah. It really was. It was just so meaningful. But I always said that, and you got to North Alabama, and you didn't even mention that. Didn't you win the Gulf South your first year there?
Yeah, we went. Now, that's the only job I took over that wasn't down. So I had to win over 9 to have a better season. But we ended up number 1 team in the country. We averaged about 50 points a game there too, and we got through about 3. We got through about 2 or 3 rounds of the playoffs. But we took over and took off at that place and got it going. That place was if you look at Division II football, historically North Alabama was one of the top ones. That was the first time I got to a place where if I don't mess up, I'm going to win. But if I'm going to win more than the last guy, I got to win a lot. And so that was kind of what happened there. But I enjoyed it. And I don't know if you know the story. After our season got over in New York, I would get to do a playoff, the Division II playoff game. And I did the Army-Navy game because it was late, and I got to do the Division II playoff game. Though we're both on ABC. Well, the playoff game is always played in Florence, Alabama. They have a nice stadium, and although they are not in the playoffs, that was the stadium site for years to come. And so I got to go down there and be and to broadcast the game. And while the game is going on, their coach resigns and takes an assistant job at Mississippi State. And the AD, who had been out having a few pops the night before with me talking, stuck a note under the door and says, "Hey, would you be interested in coming to North Alabama? We just lost our coach." And so right during the game, I said, "Well, you know what? I've never thought about it, but what the heck? I love just taking a program and turning it around." That's how I got the job at North Alabama, then to Akron, and then to ULM.
Well, I'll say this. When you were on TV, I'd give anything to see your notes. And here's why I say that. We're all a product of those around us, right? And I've had the good fortune of being influenced by some giants of the game, and I picked different things up from different people along the way. But Wes, you know how you guys make fun of me for over preparing for everything? Everybody makes fun of me. I always say I over prepare. I'm manic.
Not you.
Yeah. Well, this is one of the guys that I get that from. I'll tell you right now, because I don't know if I've ever met a more thorough person in my life than Coach Bowden. You could literally, we would take our game plan. And we had every Friday night, we'd be on the road, we'd be at home. Every Friday night, didn't matter where the venue was. We would have our 6 musts to win meeting as a team.
That's right.
Then the team would break, and offensive skill would sometimes you'd make it sound laid back. Hey, let's meet out by the pool and go over the game plan. We'd be out there 11:30, half hour past curfew, still going over the game plan against every front, every coverage. We were thorough. So if you're wondering where some of that comes from, where I get it, all right, here's your answer right here.
And I'm gonna tell you to coaches out there who want some insider, and I learned this coaching from my dad. But it's very important that the play caller is on the same page as the quarterback. If y'all aren't on the same page, he calls one play, you throw it somewhere else. He asks you, "Why'd you throw it over there?" "Well, I thought that's where you wanted me to throw it." You know what I'm talking about, Jed.
Yeah.
Well, that's why when I had Jimbo Fisher as my quarterback, he played for me. He was with me 13. He might have been with Nick Saban a year or two, but he was with me 13 years. And so I knew that when we went over that game plan with you or a quarterback, that what I called, Jimbo had taught that quarterback. So what was going through my mind was also going through his mind. Now, I say that because I look at West Virginia, and I got this at ULM. When I hired Rich Rodriguez, I got Rhett Rodriguez as my quarterback. And I knew I had to not fool. Now, I love calling plays, but once you bring Rich in, you don't get to call plays anymore. That's off. So I said, I'll go raise money for the program and let Rich do it. But what I remembered getting Rhett knew the offense as well as Rich did. And so what plays Rich called, Rhett could run. He knew it exactly. They were on the same page, just like me and Jimbo Fisher. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, it's a Rhett going to coach quarterbacks at West Virginia.
He is. Yep.
But that's going to be the perfect thing, because every day Rich is going to know that quarterback is getting the exact teaching that almost comes out of his mouth. And that's part of the continuity that you got to have. And of course, Rich has a great staff. He took almost all mine with him to Jacksonville because they were good coaches and he could pay more money. I didn't blame it because they all got a raise, when I lost them there. But I thought if I'd had to Rhett and Rich one more year, which I thought I was going to get them for 2 before he left, we'd have got that thing turned around altogether. But I think that's important with quarterback, and I think that's going to be a real positive with Rich being able to get Rick. I think Rhett worked with him at Jacksonville State as well.
You nailed the chemistry piece to it. It's always been critical to when you get a quarterback who can finish the play caller's sentences.
Oh yeah,
that's when you know you're on something. And in retrospect, when I look at how you orchestrated that whole approach to us getting ready to how we were going to go about our business on a Saturday, those Friday night meetings, like you remember old Zan Vineyard? Zan would say,
"Smart as a lick."
Smart as the smartest guy maybe we had anywhere around Birmingham, and he was a smart cat. But we would often say it was so thorough that even if you didn't know much about the offense, we could take one of our linebackers and sit in that meeting, and he'd kind of know the offense by the next morning.
Pick it up. That's exactly right.
You knew every coverage you were going to see. You knew every disguise you were going to see, every tell they had, and you absolutely felt prepared. And that's something that having played for Rich, you guys have that in common. I never played a game for either one of you where I felt on any level at all unprepared. I was prepared for everything with both of you.
Yeah.
That's one of the things you definitely had in common.
Well, the thing that changed, and I missed it, and I think Rich, both of us missed it. Back when we were I was at Auburn, and he was at Salem College, and maybe a little bit at Glenville. You might be able. It was not a fast. It just started to get no huddle. So I mean, when I could direct where the ball was going to go. 344 X takeoff, 344 Z post. I could tell the quarterback in my play calling exactly where I wanted it thrown, and I probably didn't have to because we're on the same page. But when you get into fast break, no huddle offense, you got to have your quarterback on the same page because he's got to, as Mike Leach used to tell me, quarterback, you got the last good look at everything. So you better change it at the last second if it's not what we thought it was, because you have the last good look at that defense. I don't. And so that was a whole new approach than what I came up with, is that you've got to be on such a great relationship with your quarterback that when he sees that defense and he's calling plays with no huddle, he sees what you want to see as a head coach. And it gets more difficult, but it's something that the great ones can do.
I mean, there are certain things that once a quarterback gets him in his toolbox, that it has universal utility. You can take it and use it in any system. So I often found myself, there were things that I learned from you and Jimbo that I still applied when I was at West Virginia, when I was at Glenville, in a completely different system. But there were still principles. Like I remember we would have the rule: shortest side, softest coverage. Shortest side, softest
corner.
coverage.
That's right.
You want to attack? Yeah. So I mean, I would have that mindset. It was always in the back of my eye. So of all things being equal, I'd kind of just default back to shortest side, softest coverage. I remember even we were taught everything from a read standpoint. Here's your read key. Here's why he's either going to do this, or this. And even sometimes when there wasn't a read key, like I remember what we used to call 344 Chevy, our deep crossing route.
Right.
Like Jimbo would tell us, like, it's going to sound strange, but you don't really have a read key. You have a space you're reading, not a key.
Yeah.
And so there were even things like that because we had, again, once I entered into a run and shoot system with Rich, there were enough similarities between these packages. Some things are relatively universal that I could apply some of what I learned, not just from Rich, but from you, from Coach Wallace, from Coach Nealon at WU, that it served me well in any system. And that was what was neat about it. That's why I was so happy. People ask, like, look, I was in the transfer portal before it was cool. I played at 3 schools back when nobody else was doing that, right? But I'm very glad my career went the way it did because I got to learn so much from so many different people on the offensive side of the football that are so good at what they do.
Yeah, and it's a lot of coaches don't make it because they can't adjust and adapt to different schemes or different styles of play. If you're a head coach over a decade, you better be willing to adjust and adapt. If you were the first coach to put in the wishbone, you won a championship. And if you were the last to take it out, you got fired. And so you had to understand when that no huddle stuff started and when will it go back to, 'cause it'll move eventually to something else. And even now you got more tight end offense. And I wish I could get my fullback back in there like Schmitt, like y'all had it at West Virginia back under Nalen. That was so exciting to watch. I think it was Nalen. No, that might have been a Rich that y'all had to Schmitt at fullback.
Owen played for Rich. Yeah,
that was Rich. Yeah, that was. I mean, that was back when we had some big personnel. But like I say, the thing that my dad taught me. I mean, he was in the middle of a 14-game, unbelievable winning streak, top 4 in the nation, 14 straight years, and right in the middle of it, he changed from I formation to 4 wide out no huddle with Charlie Ward and won the national championship. You got to know when to make that move. And you got to be willing to grow with the programs and do what they're doing now, and that's what a coach is. And Rich has been through coaching a lot of years. He's seen it from a lot of perspectives, and I think that's one thing that's a benefit to somebody that knows what the best thing to do now in this era is.
Jed, real quick, I was just gonna say, if you don't let me, if I could jump in off of that, please. Terry, I think you're spot on, right? Being on top of trends, being ahead of trends,
right?
Knowing when to zig, when it's time to zig, when it's zag, when it's time to zag. That's a huge part of being a coach. I think part of that, right, is making the right decisions with your coaching staff, and sometimes taking chances on maybe some younger voices or different voices. And for you, I feel like Zac Alley had to be
Right.
along that lines. I mean, I think he was like 27, 28 when you hired him as the youngest defensive coordinator in FBS. We're obviously all very excited to have him in Morgantown with Rich. What was it about Zac that you liked when you hired him at ULM? And what can you kind of tell us about just a young and up and comer and one of those guys who's kind of zigging and zagging and with the modern game here?
Well, let me tell you. When I went to left Akron, I was an analyst at Clemson for 2 years, and I was an offensive analyst, but I did the crossover work for the defensive staff. And Venables, and Venables, I did it for him, and I began to study, and I sat and listened and watched what he did, and I loved what he did philosophically. I loved the aggressiveness that he played, the attack style. He has a blitz package that could be different every game. It might be the safety one week, it may be the outside backer the next week. It may be the inside backer moving wide. He was able to give you the threats and problems with different people, but not changing what they do. And I said, I've got to find somebody that can run his stuff. I said, I got to find somebody that I can afford at ULM before they get expensive. And so Zac Alley had been a student assistant for Venables for 4 years. Then he had been a graduate assistant for 2 years. Then he had been an analyst for 2 years. So that was 8 years under Venables. And so I said, you know what? This guy, and he's a sharp guy. He's a sharp. He had to learn by being a football coach because he's not big. He wasn't going to be a big star football player because of his size. And that's kind of the way I was. And so I knew from who I talked to everybody. And I knew in my head coaching experience, if I have me, an offensive line coach, and a defensive coordinator, I can build around that. Even quarterback coach, I gotta have the right one, but I can build if I'm going to be involved. And Jed can tell you, I usually sat in the most every quarterback meeting there was, but I knew that. I think Rich knows that too. He had to find the right defensive coordinator. Well, he took Zac to Jacksonville, and then Zac went to Oklahoma, and then I think he got West Virginia was a great place for Zac to go to at this point in time in his career. Although Oklahoma has so much prestige, I think there's some uncertainty out there. And most games, I studied all his games for podcasting this year. Their defense kept them in almost every game last year, and it still didn't help some days. So he's going to be a real asset to West Virginia, and the people are going to love him because he's a hardworking, smart, dedicated young coach that will be the defense was in good hands.
What do you think he did, or for that matter, the combination of Zac as the defense coordinator, Rich as the offensive coordinator, you running the show? People who don't know, Louisiana Monroe, like Rich says, everybody should serve a tour of duty at Monroe, right? Now we got our buddy Coleman Barnes down there. I don't know if you saw that, Coach, but
I saw that. I sure did.
Coleman's great people. Coleman's a great dude. But so he's down at Monroe. But you're going to lack resources. It's tough to get kids down there. You're going to have to overachieve. You're going to have to absolutely milk every single ounce that you can out of every player that you get in there. And you're going to have to pull some miracles and make some magic happen. So what about that environment and that particular special set of challenges? What do you think that brought out in a young Zac Alley, and how that match off of what Rich was doing?
Well, we had to find one. We had to search high and low for football players. I mean, again, ULM has fired every coach. They've had one winning season since they were national champions when Stan Humphries was the quarterback at 1AA. And then they went to 1A, and they haven't had but one winning season, and they lost that bowl, and they fired every coach. And smallest Division I school, smallest public university, lowest budget. And I figured if we could get the right coaches in there, my goal was 65. Go till I'm 70, then turn it over to a young guy. And so Zac became a type of guy, and we had to get good football players, and we had to be aggressive. We couldn't play on our heels. We had to try to win games defensively. That's the mindset he had to have, that our offense wasn't talented enough to go out there and guarantee we could score. Sun Belt's one of the best G5 conferences in the country with the amount of emphasis put on football. And so we were able to do that. We got hurt by the two things that started when we got there was portal transfer every good player we had left because every school had more facilities. And then NIL, we had no money, so we couldn't give any NIL. So I can see where Rich, all those coaches that went with Rich, it was smart. They were able to beat that, but I kept having to replace that. But Zac I knew when I got Zac that I was going to be fine because he was going to be aggressive. He was going to play defense to win it defense if he had to, because some days, my dad always told me that, offense and quarterbacks kind of like pitchers. Sometimes they aren't hitting the corners of the plate. Offense is a little bit fickle. Sometimes it just ain't working. Defense with aggressiveness and 11 people to the ball can generally play good every week if they don't have a bad game plan. And so Zac gives you, I think, the best chance for Rich to focus on offense and let Zac handle that defense.
I like where you're going with that part of the conversation. I think you're providing information that Mountaineer fans aren't otherwise going to know about Zac Alley, right? There's only so much you can get on the internet and read. I mean, you're the guy that brought him down there and gave him his first whistle around his neck as an actual defensive play caller. You knew about him when you were at Clemson because you were around Venables. So you knew what you were hopefully getting. Continue to talk to us about, you and I both know the offensive guys. The worst thing you can do as a defensive guy is let us know you're going to be aggressive and just do it every down and we know it's coming because we'll make you pay for it, right? So what is it about Zac? He obviously does things to keep those offenses off balance and picks his spots judiciously enough that he's not getting gashed like some of these guys who try and bring up that kind of heat.
And I mentioned this a few minutes ago, and Venables did a great job at Clemson. Your blitz package, your aggressiveness comes from different ways. You've got to change up. You can't give them a dose of what they saw the week before. If you're going to be aggressive, you better be the safety this week, or the cornerback on the short side, or it better be an outside backer on a twist. You better find some way each week. He did a great job, Venables did, and I think Zac did a great job when he went with us at ULM. Being aggressive, but not giving the offense what they're used to seeing. If an offense knows what you're going to run, because an offense, they know what the players in the defense don't. They have certain advantages that they have. And one thing the defense has got to do, they've got to be unpredictable to some extent. Just like a quarterback, a good play caller is unpredictable on offense in his play calling. And I think Zac will understand how to be aggressive, because I'll be honest with you, you can't play great defense without being aggressive. I don't see too many defenses that play on their heels and sit in the same defense every day and don't hide their coverages that are very good. Because if I can see it and I can know before the ball is snapped what they're going to do every time, I'm going to beat them. I'm going to find a way. I'm going to hit their weaknesses. I'm going to beat them. No matter however many men they've got, they got one zone they can't cover, and I'm going to find a way to attack it. And so I think Zac will give you a good variation week to week. And he's a downright hard-nosed worker. He gets up early, he coaches late, and he's going to put the time in to be good. I know when I went to Auburn, not to go back, and I didn't sleep one night, 1 minute for 11 straight weeks. I stayed up all night working on my game plan, all night. I couldn't sleep because I wanted to make sure I knew everything. And I think Zac, like Nick Saban and like some of these guys that have been ultra successful, they understand that when if you don't know what the best thing to do this game, if everybody will pull together, we do it as hard as we can, it'll work until we find the best way to get it done.
So let's hit this real quick as we start to wind down. Go back to that 2021 season when you had Zac, when you had Rich. I think we've kind of established that every win at a place like Monroe is worth its weight in gold. Every win. Don't take anything for granted. And it's funny, we're dating ourselves, Coach, because I remember watching that Stan Humphries game. They were Northeast Louisiana against Marshall.
That's right.
It was 43-42. I remember it like it was yesterday, okay? But it's a tough place to win. In 2021, you beat Dion, but he was at Jackson State. You beat Troy. You found a way to knock off South Alabama. Let's not take any of that for granted. But, Wes, I don't know if you remember this or not. Maybe you do. One of the biggest, if not the biggest, upset of the 2021 college football season. Monroe hosted the Liberty Flames with Malik Willis.
Right.
Willis. Yep.
Liberty was favored by 28 points. And guess who came out on top? Coach Bowden, Louisiana Monroe, Rich Rodriguez, Zac Alley. Walk us through the how in all three phases that happened. I mean, it looked to me, I've watched the tape, it looked to me like he really had Malik Willis confused, but it also looked to me like the offense was making plays at the right time. I mean, everything just came together.
Well, and again, that season we lost Rhett. He had a punctured lung, and we lost him right at that point where we thought we could turn the program completely around in one season. We lost him and had to go to our backup. Backup was pretty good, but that gave us problems that we had to win defensively. But Malik, the quarterback for Liberty, what was his name? Malik
Willis, yeah.
Yeah, he threw he threw picks, and he threw picks because of the different variations that Zac was giving him. And the biggest thing in a game like that, you just got to hang around. You're not. They're favored. They're favored by almost 30. They got a better football team. They got a great quarterback. The key is just hang around, because the longer you hang around, if you're the upset team, the team that's underdog, the more the other team gets nervous, gets frustrated, and the more your teams get confident. And I think it was a lot of things going on, but defensively, we kept Malik confused, and we kept him confused. And he threw 2 interceptions. I think the last 2 drives. I know the very last play of the game, he did the cardinal sins, throw an interception on first or second down when you're in your 2-minute offense. You don't throw interception until the last play of the game. You throw it away if you don't. But he threw an interception. I want to say it's second down or first down in that last play. We finished him off and hit the field goal to win the game. And he hit the field goal and then he threw an interception. So it was the defense just kept him off balance and gave him some different looks.
I'm going to toss back to you, because there's a danger that Coach Bowden and I could. If you have another question, go ahead. But we can do this all
go
night.
all day.
Listening.
No, he's
like
giving us
things that he's Wes. The little things that he's mentioning, like it's perspective is so funny, because like Coach Bowden's talking about McNeese State, how he remembers McNeese State is getting his doors blown off, right?
Oh.
That McNeese State game that he's talking about, you know what I think of when I think of that game?
What's that?
It's the first college. It was my first college completion, and I thought it was a big deal. It was late in the game. It was on a Florida screen, Coach. You remember Florida? I tell you what, Ted Darby could throw that Florida screen now. I couldn't throw it that well, but Ted had that perfect.
Lay it over.
Well, I remember it was so cool that week was I actually made it on Coach Bowden's talk show, hosted by Piggly Wiggly, when they showed me throwing the Florida.
Nice.
But that's my memory of that McNeese State game. Your memory's getting blown out. But Wes, what do you got?
No, I just, I really appreciate the time. This has been awesome. I've got like a front row seat here for some great conversation. And I mean, we've had you here for about an hour, so we will let you go. But Terry, it was great meeting with you. Great getting to chat with you, hearing some of those stories, getting your thoughts on some of the current group that is in Morgantown, and hoping to get the football program moving in the right direction. And maybe since I do believe you are involved with high school football, is that correct? But hopefully we could get you back up to Mountaineer Field a couple more times as well.
Well, I wasn't in high school football, but I was helping high school seniors learn how to get jobs after high school.
Awesome.
I didn't know, but I've gotten away from that. But I will say this: my brother Tommy emailed me today. Some people at West Virginia that they're trying to put together on October 25th. I think it's a home game against TCU. All the players that played for my dad, but that goes back when he was an assistant. 66 to his last year at 86. Was it 86? 80
76.
76, yeah.
Yeah,
all of his players are going to come back. They're trying to organize a reunion. I said, Tommy, I'm coming back for that one. That'll be a lot of fun.
You have to.
But anyway, I don't know if they've got it it's in the works. But I noticed today they're going to try to get everybody. You know how it is. They always try to get all Nealon's guys back, all Bobby Bowden's. And I'm sure there's some money being raised involved with all that. But it'd be an awful good one to come against TCU.
Well, that's
through the Jim Carlin years, Wes. Yeah.
Yep.
Through Bobby. Wow.
That's fantastic. That's very cool. That's something to look forward to. And as long as all works out, we hope you really enjoy yourself and are able to enjoy that time and reconnect with some old people. Terry Bowden, thank you so much again for taking the time. This was awesome.
It was awesome. Have me back anytime. Take care.
We will. That'll do it for this edition of ITG. So for our producer, Schuyler Callihan, the beer truck Big O, he's Terry Bowden. He's the signal caller, Jed Drenning, and I'm Wes Uhler. The one thing we ask of you is to be an ear and tell an ear about your new favorite WVU football podcast. Take care, everybody. We'll talk to you soon. You've been In the Gun.
ITG.
The fun doesn't have to stop here.
Be sure to hit subscribe and never miss an episode.
If you have any questions, suggestions, or feedback,
be sure to follow us on X at In the Gun Podcast.
Join us again next time
Until then,
tell an ear to tell an ear about your new favorite WVU football podcast.
This mission is over. It's over.